Can I be honest? I've lived in both extremes. I've floated through life on autopilot, avoiding responsibility, and I've swung to the other side of the pendulum, taking extreme ownership, trying to control every variable and outcome. Neither produced long-term peace, and neither really led to fulfillment. The problem is, extreme ownership taught me that my value rose and fell on my results. If things went well, then I was important. And if things failed, then I felt like a failure. I was only as valuable as what I could produce. And that mindset crushed me with shame or inflated me with pride and arrogance. So eventually I would swing back to the other direction and become indifferent and disengaged or even lazy. I didn't know how to hold responsibility without being owned by it. There was one time in a job interview, I was asked a simple question: Brady, how do you define success? And I paused and it hit me. True success is obedience to God. If God is the judge, then He alone defines success. Not my bank account, not my circumstances, and not how many followers I have on social media or how many subscribers I have on YouTube, which I hope you subscribe. This realization changed everything. I was no longer trapped between pride and indifference. I began to humble myself and search to discover what God values. And Scripture is pretty clear. We're not owners. We're actually stewards. So here's the biblical foundation. Psalms 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it." That means nothing starts with us. Nothing ultimately belongs to us, or everything we touch is actually entrusted to us. If God owns it, we manage it. Whenever I take an ownership mentality, I decide what matters. I decide what succeeds, what has value, but my human value system is self-serving and self-centered, self-conscious, and ultimately self-destructing. That's why Jesus said, if anyone wants to be my disciple, he must deny himself, pick up his cross, and follow me. Jesus isn't taking life away from us. He's rescuing us from self-destruction and leading us into true freedom. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus tells the parable of the talents. The master gives different amounts. In verse 16 it says, "The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. Now the servant with 2 bags of silver went and worked and earned 2 more. But the servant who received 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they used his money. The servants didn't choose what they were given, but the master was curious if they were going to be faithful. It's not about how much we can produce, but it's about how faithful we can be with the resources that have been entrusted to us. This is actually the very reason why I started this YouTube channel. I was sitting here in this very office and I had looked over to my camera equipment and the Lord had given it to me, but I was convicted because I wasn't using it. I felt like I wasn't being faithful with all that God had entrusted me with. I could have been fearful and said, I don't know how to create a YouTube channel. Or I could invest the time and energy to learn how to use these tools, how to use my talents to actually further God's kingdom. So that's where I am right now, making this video out of faithfulness. Now, faithfulness can apply to all kinds of things like family, calling, business, leadership. But Jesus also warns about that ownership mindset. In Luke chapter 12, verse 15, he warns us, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. When I know that God is the master and the owner of all things, I desire to learn what He values above my own. And I've learned that His values actually mirror His character. So God is faithful, trustworthy, self-sacrificing, obedient, compelled by love, even for His enemies. So as I'm contemplating my success in stewardship, I'm asking, am I being faithful, trustworthy, self-sacrificing, obedient, and motivated by love? If so, then I'm not just stewarding my life, I'm actually reflecting the character and nature of Christ. Our relationships, business, and ministry reflect His glory, not my own. As you pray and spend time with Jesus, ask, what am I trying to control that I was never meant to own? What has God entrusted me that I need to be faithful with? And then what would change if you and I released ownership today?